I'd like to call this meeting of the Texarkana, Arkansas Board of Directors to order. If you would, just silence your cell phones, please, out of respect of the board and anyone here that's present. If you wish to speak tonight during the citizens communication time, it's not required, but we have a citizens communication card there on the ledge. You can fill that out and get that to our city clerk. We would appreciate that. But you'd still be permitted to speak if you don't fill out one of those cards. At this time, we will have the roll call.
Director Harris?
Here.
Director Hollabush?
Here.
Director Odom?
Here.
Director Minor?
Here.
Director Peavy?
Here.
Assistant Mayor Teeters?
Here.
Mayor Brown?
Yes, here. All right, at this time, we'll have the invocation and the pledge by Director Travis Owen.
Join me in prayer, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Jesus, for this day that you've given us. We thank you for each member of the Board of Directors. We thank you for these folks that have attended tonight. And we just pray that you'll be with us. And Jesus, help us to do everything that's right for the city of Texarkana, Arkansas. And we ask this all in your wonderful holy name. Amen and amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. At this time, I believe we have a presentation by the Library Director, Jennifer Strayhorn, regarding the Texarkana Public Library. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Directors, and City staff. I'm Jennifer Strayhorn, and I've been the Director of the Texarkana Public Library for about 5 years now. And I just would like to just give you an update about what's going on with the library that serves both cities. Next. A little bit of history. The library was first begun by the Young Women's Christian Association, just as a little book collection. And in 1925, they met in public for the first time and decided to start a library. And this is the building that they used for their library. And interestingly, back then, it was not a free library. You had to belong. You had to pay a membership to check out books. And this apparently was the home of a former mayor of Arkansas, Texarkana, Arkansas. I'm not quite sure who the mayor is, but I'm on the hunt for it.
Looks like
Next.
a temple home.
And then in 1952, this is the building on State Line. It cost $80,000, and it was built on a section donated by James Bowie City Park. Thereafter, because this was on the Texas side, the library was to serve both citizens of the whole city, both cities. So they asked the Arkansas legislature to pass an ordinance that would be able to use money from one state to benefit citizens in another state. And that's how we have come to our current funding. Next. This is our current library, and it was built in 1980 through an economic development grant. And then in 2006, we had a renovation of the library. The library is supported by a library commission, which is comprised of 10 members, 5 from each side of the city. And they are the advisory commission of the library. We also have a library foundation, which is comprised of 9 members, and they are mainly the fundraisers of the library, They administer endowments and things of that nature. And then our biggest support is the Friends of the Library. They do have a bookstore on Broad Street that's open twice a month, and all that money goes to the library for extra things that are not in our budget. For instance, they've helped with shelving, signage. They've bought a library vehicle for us. Next, and these are some of the members. On the left-hand side, the members of the current commission, and on the right-hand side, the members of our foundation. Next. This is the breakdown of, I often ask, well, who pays for what? This is the money that we get from the Texas side and the Arkansas side, and it's the percentage is based on population, which is pretty true to form how it comes out. It's supposed to be 60-40, and that's about what it is. The city of Texarkana, Texas, gives us that lump sum. In Arkansas, the millage is the property tax that the residents of the city pay, and it's 1 mill that's dedicated for the library. And then the Arkansas State Library, it's based on the state decides how much money they're going to give, and then it's divided up among all the Arkansas libraries. So we are considered an Arkansas library, and that's our allotment for this past year. And then the city, you gracious people, have given us $5,000 a year. Next. And this is a general breakdown of where our money's going. The building, it's probably a little bit more than that just because it's an old, older building. And of course we have our collections, which is all the books and materials that we buy, computers and all that. Next. Just some interesting statistics. We do get about, each day we get between 400 and 500 people through our doors. A lot of that, it's increased because we got a new counter system, and we do have a meeting room which is in use all the time, sometimes 3 times a day. So we are now counting those people that come to the like the Beekeepers Association meeting or different sororities in town, that they may not come into the library, but they are using the library building. Next. This is just what our collection is at right now. On the next slide, we do have a genealogy collection, and although we don't have a dedicated person there, it's used quite a bit. We receive a lot of written requests. We do have a volunteer who helps with research and everything, because anyone who does genealogy knows it can get very involved, and we just don't have the time or the manpower to dedicate one person to that. But we also do buy Heritage Quest online, which helps a lot of people from home if they don't want to come to the library. Next. We do have 14 public computers, and we offer wireless internet the hours that the library is open, which is 64 hours a week. This is our children's room. It's it's in the main library. In the renovation, we did include a restroom that is for use only for families. So unless you can't use it unless you have a child in the building. And these are some of our children's programs. We did have a therapy dog that was Sketty. She had some health issues, so we're looking for a new one. If anybody knows of someone that has a therapy dog, what that does is the children read. If they're having trouble reading to a dog is a lot easier and less embarrassing. They kind of open up when they're reading to a dog, and usually those therapy dogs are wonderful. They'll sit there and look like they're really listening to you. We do have a drive-through window and book drop. and cookies for your pets if you have them. And this is, we've seen an increase in the people who use this. You can actually log onto our computer with a library card, request the books that you want. We pull them off the shelf and then have them at the drive-through window. You drive up the next day and they're there for you. This is really handy for people who have had surgeries that, you know, they're in the car to get their library books and the spouse is driving them to the library. So that they don't have to navigate the, getting inside, although we do have handicap parking. And it's also very popular with mothers with children in the car. They don't want to take the time to come inside. And then these are our databases. We have, let's see, this Arkansas and Texas both provide databases for us, and these are at the bottom are some things that you can use: foreign language learning, things on entrepreneurship. We have a foundation directory. All these things would cost. I've got the figure here somewhere. That would cost $156,000 if we were to buy all those databases. But the state of Arkansas and the state of Texas provide that to us. We do spend over $10,000 on Value Line, consumer reports, and the tutoring program. Next. And then we've just started an e-card, which is for people to use those databases so that right now, if you're living within the city limits, your library card's free because it's being paid by taxpayer money. However, if you live outside the city limits, there's a $20 fee per year. That's to check out books and DVDs and everything we have. But we've decided with the databases that you can go ahead and get that online. You don't even have to come to the library, and then you can use that if you live outside the city limits. So you have access to e-books, audiobooks, and all the databases. And I'd be glad to welcome any questions.
Does anybody have any questions of Ms. Strait?
Do you have enough room for all that you're wanting to do?
We could use. Right now, the building, if you've been inside, is one big open area, and we frequently get requests for areas for private study, group study, like that. And it is open. The children's room's open to the large area, so it can get noisy. That would be the only thing. Right now, and also we could use more room for the collection. We're adding to it, so. We just went through a big process of taking all the outdated books off and purchasing new items, so that's always an area that we can use, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving along tonight's agenda, the next item is the consent agenda, which contains the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting February 4th, as well as adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to purchase one single axle dump truck, a Freightliner for TWU. Yes, sir.
I'll make a correction with the minutes on what I said during the citizen communication time, but I noticed it wasn't in there. What I stated that a street that I gave it was 81, which should have been 71. Highway 71. I said 81, but I noticed that's not even in the minutes, so I don't know if it's, which they get it to another point. I bring that up another day, so.
Yes.
Mayor, I make a motion that we pass the two items on the consent agenda tonight.
Here a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say yes.
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 Any opposed? A motion carries. Moving right along to our regular agenda, the first item on our regular agenda tonight is to adopt an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Texarkana, Arkansas regarding a lot of record definitions. This ordinance is sponsored by Assistant Mayor Linda Teeters and City Planner Mary Beck. I think Ms. Beck is here as well to answer any questions. It's my understanding that this was brought up last year, back in September, and Assistant Mayor Teeters can correct me if I'm wrong, and I know there was some confusion about the tiny house and that type of stuff, but this specifically is addressing some issues that need to be taken care of with the city. As I read it, it also allows us to be able to change this, and this would need to be changed anyway prior to implementing or adopting anything to do with the tiny house amendment or tiny house ordinance. And the tiny house ordinance, it's my understanding that we were asked not to do anything with the no recommendation was given to this board to do anything with that specific ordinance based on the fact that the International Building Code is in the process of changing, and that we didn't want to do something that would be in violation of the International Building Code until that is taken care of. So at this time, I understand this has been read 3 times. This ordinance has been read 3 times. And so tonight, we would entertain a motion to approve of this ordinance as it is written.
And if Ms. Beck would like to say anything, kind of just to summarize, I think it was mainly just we have so many lots that because of their dimensions, correct, Ms. Beck, we can't build certain structures based on that. So this is simply revisiting that.
Second.
It is.
Right. So just, anything else you need to add to that? I think that's primarily all we're talking about here. Not the houses themselves, but just revisiting what can, exactly, the lots.
Yes, the lots prior to 1988 that were adopted as legal subdivisions and filed. Here's an example. Mr. Smith's property, and he's here today, but he's built, well, actually hasn't built, he's renovated a house here and a house here, and this was demolition. So this represents this is actually out of our atlas. I outlined a lot right here that he would like to use. Under our current regulations, because he owns property on either side, he can't build on that lot. And in order to change that, he can't go to the lot to the north because it's already less than 50-foot frontage. He would have to go to the lot to the south where this house is. And basically, that house is for sale. He would have to change the legal description, replat that property, and basically crowd this large house to be able to utilize his property. So that's just an example of an existing problem for someone, and Mr. Smith has been waiting since last September for an answer about, how we can proceed.
There were several. There was at least, was it not, 4 planning commission meetings held on this particular ordinance. And this ordinance was developed through the collaboration between the planning commission and the board, and received a unanimous recommendation of approval from not only from staff, but from the planning commission as well.
Yes, sir. And I should have clarified when I came up here that I'm here on behalf of the planning commission's recommendation as your technical board, and that their recommendation is for approval, and I'm here to answer any questions.
So Mary, this is going to make it easier explain how this is going to make it, you explained how hard the process was. How's this going to make it easier for Mr.
Well,
Smith?
if you adopt this ordinance tonight with the emergency clause, Mr. Smith can go tomorrow and get a building permit and build the house that he wants to on that property immediately. Without that, he's going to need to hire a surveyor, go out there and replat the property. From personal experience, that's probably going to be about several $100s. And
in addition to whatever he might have to do to change his paperwork and his deeds for the home on the south side that he has for sale. That might, depending on the surveyor and what their backlog of work is, it might be a few months before he could even begin to do that.
And one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
Leaving it as it is, aren't we kind of locking certain properties in town so that they really can't be developed on at all? Is that correct? So we've got abandoned lots that the city nor a homeowner can really do anything with at our current standing.
That is
But if
our
we
largest
ma-
problem right now.
Right.
That would alleviate.
That's going to alleviate a lot
Some of
of
the
vacant lots that they just can't do anything with
That's
because
correct.
of the restrictions we have.
And guess who's having to maintain those properties?
Right, exactly, and the city's maintaining it.
I have a question or comment, I don't know which. I mean, these are 48-foot lots,
Yes, ma'am.
and where are people going to park?
Well, a 50-foot lot or a 48-foot lot, the parking is going to be the same issue. And the way these homes were built, the parking usually was in the back. There is an alley, but that goes through there.
Well,
Oops.
there's maybe a dedicated alley, but we hardly even maintain alleys anymore. Is that correct? I mean, I hardly know of any alleys that are still.
These homes, I believe, have accessory buildings on the rear side and would have access to park back there, I mean, in the rear of the property or on the street. Or they could, they could have a carport or garage. They would have to meet all of the regulations in the building code, just like a lot that's 50-foot wide.
So the width and the length of the driveways wouldn't change because these are smaller properties, correct? They would still have to follow the ordinances that are already
That's true.
in place.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm just afraid they'll pour a single driveway, but as we know, people have 2 cars at least. And where is a guest going to park? On the corners? That's my concern.
Excuse me.
But now, as it is, he's going to already, the second lot is available to him.
It has a structure on it. Right here. There's like a...
So at this time, he's actually going to use one lot.
Right. This lot has construction on it, and these 4 lots have construction on
Okay.
them. This is a vacant lot.
That's the only.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Ms. Beck.
If I maybe it would help out a little bit, we're talking about the property owned by Paul Smith
Yes.
at 10th and Pecan. You know, the big white house he redid
I know.
with the big column. Then he bought the house next door, was a roundhouse, he's working on
Right.
that now.
Right.
And then the lot next to that is the one that we're
That
referring to.
we're talking about. Okay.
It's my understanding, in order to be able to build one now, he just needed 2 foot.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, that helps my perspective. I know what you're talking about. Okay, I had forgotten about all of you. Yeah.
Yes, Director Harris.
Would that mean anyone will not have to go to the board of adjustment for get a house built on a smaller lot?
Well, the Board of Adjustment can't change the lot size. Now, they can make an allowance to address a need within the ordinance for where structure's placed on the lot. For instance, if there was a piece of property that the topography dropped off steeply and they couldn't set their house back the required number of feet from the front of the road, then the Board of Adjustment could allow them to go around the ordinance as far as for where things are placed on the lot. But the Planning Commission can allow variances on plats, but they would still need to replat that property, and it would need to go to the Planning Commission. So it would be a lot of expense for a small lot that right now these lots are, lots of times they're underused because people see them as they're going to cost them a lot more money than if they could just go build on them.
And this was a plat that was developed prior to 1988.
Yes, sir.
So, and there would be no reference to go through the Board of Adjustment because you can't get the house built in its present form now. So you can't even ask for a variance because you can't even build it under a certain pretense. It was also, this is, as the ordinance states, as I've read, we've got 98 subdivisions that are developed that will fall in this category in the future that were platted and developed and approved by this board prior to 1988. And that's the issues that we have because they did not coincide with the long-range strategic development plan for the city. Correct? That's the way I understand it.
Yes, sir.
This will get all of them a possibility to get some development going on those lots by these 2 feet, as he said, or whatever the case may be. Most of them will be what I would assume would be small square feet that you're dealing with. It would get them in compliance. Plus, it would take and alleviate a possibility of the city having to clean these lots up and keep them clean. There could be potential for development.
And increased tax
Absolutely.
revenue.
Increased tax revenue. Okay. All right, does anybody have any additional questions for Ms. Beck? Okay.
Mayor, I do have a couple of procedural questions. One is just to confirm that there were 3 readings prior to this. And the second, I do remember it being tabled, which is noted on the agenda, so maybe the motion, in interest of time, is to remove from the table and adopt. You could take those up separately, but however you feel. Just to keep consistent on your procedure.
So just entertain a motion to remove it from the table and then entertain a motion to adopt.
If you wanted to take them up both at the same vote, I wouldn't object to that.
So you've heard the city attorney. We can take this up in one vote, which I would entertain a motion that we remove it from the table and a motion to adopt in the same motion, or if it's the board's desire, we can take them up in separate motions. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for either.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion, we remove it from the table and adopt it.
Okay?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to remove it from the table and adopt it. Is there any other discussion? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak about this ordinance? Okay. Having or hearing none, then Heather, would you call the roll, please?
Harris.
Yes.
Holovich.
Yes.
Odom.
Yes.
Minor.
Yes.
Peavy.
Yes.
Teeters.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes. Okay, the motion is approved. We've also asked, this ordinance is attached with an emergency clause to enact this with an emergency clause. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to enact an emergency clause with this specific ordinance.
Motion to enact an emergency clause.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enact an emergency clause. Is there any other discussion? If not, Heather, could you call the roll, please?
Harris.
Yes.
Holovich.
Yes.
Odom.
Yes.
Minor.
Yes.
Peavy.
Yes.
Teeters.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes. So the ordinance passes and the emergency clause passes. All right, moving right along to our next agenda item, which is to adopt an ordinance authorizing the city manager to purchase a 3-year Microsoft Enterprise license agreement for licenses used by all departments of Texarkana Water Utilities. This ordinance also is requiring an emergency clause. Okay. At this time, is there any discussion? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Directors. I'm Kevin Davenport. I'm the IT manager for the water utilities. I want to kind of give you a little bit of background on these licenses. At the time, the city and water utilities all use Microsoft Office 365 licenses for email and document management and such like that. We also have several licenses that are used for server access and access to the computers and all that. They're used by the various city utility staff. This particular set of licenses is for the servers and user licenses used by the water utilities. We actually manage 5 different agreements. This is one of those. And all these licenses would allow the water utilities to continue using the Microsoft licenses at the discounted rate over the next 3 years. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, if we were smart enough to ask you some, we might.
3 years, right? I got smart.
3 years.
This one is coming.
And this is an extension. We've continued with this enterprise agreement program since 2010.
So you're happy with it?
Yeah, it works great. So,
And all of the funds used to pay for this will be coming out of the TWU budget.
yes. And it is currently budgeted.
Any other discussions? Okay. We'll have to have 3 readings tonight if we want to enact this and enact the emergency clause. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for this to be read in its first reading.
I move that it be read in abbreviated form.
Second.
So we have a motion and second to read it on its first reading in its abbreviated form. Heather, could you call the roll?
Harris.
Yes.
Hollish.
Yes.
Odom.
Yes.
Minor.
Yes.
Peavy.
Yes.
Teeters.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
An ordinance waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the execution of a Microsoft Enterprise license agreement declaring an emergency and for other purposes.
Mayor, I move that the rule be suspended and placed ordinance on the second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to have it read in its abbreviated form in a second reading. Heather, could you call the roll, please?
Harris.
Yes.
Hollish.
Yes.
Odom.
Yes.
Minor.
Yes.
Peavy.
Yes.
Teeters.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
An ordinance waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the execution of a Microsoft Enterprise license agreement declaring an emergency and for other purposes.
I move that the rule be further suspended and placed ordinance on third and final reading.
Second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the ordinance to be placed on its third and final reading in its abbreviated form. Heather, could you call the roll?
Harris.
Yes.
Hollish.
Yes.
Odom.
Yes.
Minor.
Yes.
Peavy.
Yes.
Teeters.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
An ordinance waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the execution of a Microsoft Enterprise license agreement declaring an emergency and for other purposes.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve this ordinance. Is there any other discussion? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Okay. Seeing none and hearing none, Heather, could you call the roll, please?
Harris.
Yes.
Hollish.
Yes.
Odom.
Yes.
Minor.
Yes.
Peavy.
Yes.
Teeters.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes. Okay, this motion, the ordinance is approved. At this time, they've asked for an emergency clause on this, so I would entertain a motion to enact an emergency clause that pertains to this ordinance.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enact an emergency clause attached to this ordinance. Is there any discussion? If not, Heather, could you call the roll?
Harris.
Yes.
Hollish.
Yes.
Odom.
Yes.
Minor.
Yes.
Peavy.
Yes.
Teeters.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes. So the motion, the ordinance passes, as well as the emergency clause is enacted.